Hi, my name is L Rondeau, and I am making this speech and presentation in support of the Evolving Men of Color virtual seminar. For 20 years plus, I've been leading and directing Homeland Security, anti-terrorism, and emergency management programs for federal, state, and local governments. And I've been working with the Fortune 1000 as well, business. And it has become apparent to me that one of the greatest challenges and opportunities that exist for us to increase readiness is African American readiness. I've worked on projects to include the after action review and post analysis of large scale man made and natural disasters and events like Hurricane Katrina and the DC area sniper attacks, of course, 9/11. I'm currently engaged in COVID-19 response and recovery efforts. And anecdotal evidence and studies indicate that far too often the most vulnerable, the most severely impacted population are black and brown skinned people, African Americans. There's a lot of reasons behind this. A lot of things impact survivability and readiness. Unfortunately, some of those things still include bigotry, race, discrimination. May not be directly attributed to the first responders. That is to say, I'm not alleging that a first responder, a member of an agency, is bigoted, although that does happen. It is a complex set of issues and circumstances that make one vulnerable, from education to housing to employment. What you do for a living impacts your survivability in the face of a man-made or natural disasters. COVID-19 being an example of African Americans having a higher rate of infection and fatality associated with COVID, and African Americans having what is suspected to be less access to health care, working jobs that are considered to be frontline, and so they're working in areas that are at risk, and then suffering the ill effects of what is, in my opinion, a bigoted healthcare system that doesn't effectively weigh the concerns of African Americans. I have set about the process of getting specifics. What can we do to impact the survivability of African Americans with respect to man-made and natural disasters? I have my own thoughts. There's anecdotal evidence. The CDC has reports out that link racism, bigotry, employment, other things to the survivability of African Americans and other demographics. But as far as I can tell, no one has really conducted an in-depth study of the perceptions, the capabilities, the statements, the thought processes of African Americans. So the first phase of the African American Readiness Project has been for me to create questions designed to assess the readiness of African Americans across the country, across different demographics, gender, economic, geographic, age. I created these questions and had them vetted by professionals in the emergency management, public health, homeland security field, and the like. Other relevant backgrounds and disciplines were represented. And then I solicited feedback in the form of a survey. I created a survey that I have distributed across the country, and I have received input from hundreds of respondents. African Americans across the country have taken the time to respond to this very important survey, which is the first phase of the African American Readiness Project. Our readiness, as we are now, is largely unknown but anecdotal evidence indicates that we are at greater risk than non-African Americans when it's related to man-made and natural disasters for a lot of different reasons. The preliminary analysis of the respondent data indicates that there is a significant gap, a significant opportunity for those charged with creating response plans, action plans, conducting outreach initiatives to the African American community to do a better job in equipping us with the information we need to protect ourselves. This is not my perception alone. Hundreds of African American citizens responded. They gave feedback on, do they believe first responder agencies and the like have effectively accounted for African American concerns in emergency response plans? They responded to questions like, do African Americans, do you as an African American consider access to a legally obtained firearm to be an important part of your emergency management plan and capability? i.e., would you need access to a legal firearm to be able to enhance your security during a crisis? African Americans responded to questions like, have you reviewed your community's emergency response plan, emergency action plan, evacuation plans? Some have, some have not. We have to get to the bottom of why people would not. Even in the face of COVID, the preliminary analysis indicates that people have not had an evacuation discussion, an emergency management related discussion that could impact the survivability of African Americans with their own family members. We ask questions like, who is most responsible for your survivability during a man-made or natural disaster, the government or you? We ask, do you believe that bigotry, discrimination, bias impact your survivability? In other words, does racism make it less likely for you and your African American family and friends to survive a man-made or natural disaster? We asked that. We got responses to that question from hundreds of people. The information is disheartening, alarming, but also inspiring, promising, and is an indicator of the interest that African Americans have in their own safety and security, that African Americans counter to what people may say, what the media may promote, what people may just be under the wrong idea about, that the African American community is an engaged community, and if nothing else, the willingness of hundreds of people to respond in a very rapid fashion to 30 plus questions about safety and security is an indicator that we can do a much better job as a homeland security, emergency management, and public health community in conducting outreach initiatives to better engage African Americans in a way that would save lives. Look, we have some structural issues in society, issues of race and discrimination and bias that have so permeated society at this point in time in 2021 that we're going to have to work together to solve them. But that ownership of preparedness, of readiness, lies squarely with the African American community. And that is one of the things that is becoming very evident to me, that the resources we get are ultimately the resources we demand. that after we hold ourselves accountable for being prepared, for being informed, for being ready, that after we ensure that we have done what we need to do to impact our readiness, our survivability, to put ourselves in a position to best protect our lives, then after we have checked that box, it's up to us to hold those officials that we have elected, that we have supported, that serve us. It's up to us to hold them accountable for protecting us in a way that erases the readiness gap, the casualty gap. We don't want anyone to unnecessarily lose their lives from a flood or a hurricane or community crime. And what we're not going to tolerate going forward from ourselves or anyone else is allowing there to be some sort of statistical disparity between African American lives lost and non-African American lives lost. That stops in 2021. And the African American Readiness Initiative, which is a part of the Black and Ready project with L Rondeau, that would be me. That's a podcast and a coming television series. We are undertaking this very important project. So the first step is the creation of the questions. The second step is the issuance of the survey and the analysis of the respondent data. And now the third step is to vet that data, analyze it, make sure that we have the right set of questions, that we have identified linkages between questions, perceptions that we can drill down to, and really conduct this organic but technical risk assessment where we are linking perceptions to policy to the real life boots on the ground circumstances that impact readiness and survivability of African Americans. And then we will create another survey, target different demographics to include professional demographics, first responders and the like. And that process will result in a final report that is able to clearly articulate the state of African American readiness with respect to man-made and natural disasters. And when we say natural disasters, of course we mean hurricanes, tornadoes, weather, landslides, earthquakes. When we say man-made, of course we mean active shooter events, but within the context of saving lives, we also mean sustained violence in a community is a man-made disaster where there is hundreds of lives lost per annum. That qualifies for this project as a man-made disaster. And we're going to impact that, and we're going to save lives because I know that that evidence indicates that only in the African American community could hundreds of lives be lost annually and there not be a declared disaster of some sort. We're going to solve that with hard data. We're going to save African American lives. We're going to save lives, period, because the work we do will impact every American, every citizen around the world. But it starts right here with African Americans, the Black and Ready with L Rondeau project, and the African American Readiness Initiative. Thank you so much for participating in the Evolving Men of Color Virtual Summit. I want to thank Chico Ellsworth for his leadership in making sure that we're able to present great projects and updates like this for everyone. I'm certainly involved in African American readiness, but let it be known that I'm involved in protecting everyone in the country, regardless of race, creed, or color. And 2021 is a year where we're going to leave no vulnerable community behind. It starts with African Americans, children. If I can be of support to any initiative like that, by all means, contact me at the information associated with this video. Thank you so much. God bless. Be safe.